Rams house. It is Mock Draft Friday, our final Mock Draft Friday, presented by Prize Picks. Today, we're running through a brand new 7-round mock draft for the Los Angeles Rams. We did a 3-round mock draft yesterday, but I won't lie to you guys. It was a little out there. It was a little bit ridiculous. Today, we're getting back to the realistic stuff. Today, we're trying to do something that I've heard some comments about, make an aggressive swing to go up and get a top receiver, see what that might cost, and see how it would affect the rest of the Rams draft. So let's roll right into the first 5 picks. Fernando Mendoza goes first, as always, followed by David Bailey to the New York Jets, Jeremiah Love to the Arizona Cardinals. Just not really sure what they're doing, honestly. If they do end up drafting Love, then gosh, that franchise, which we know them well as one of our divisional rivals, they have no direction. Francis Maui-Noah goes fourth to the Tennessee Titans. And then trade alert. We've got a trade. Arvell Reese goes to the New Orleans Saints as the Giants move down the board. And then we've got a second trade, guys. This one involving us. So here's what I was hinting at the beginning of today's show. A lot of you have commented and asked, what would it cost for the Rams to trade up to go get Carnell Tate? This is what it would cost to go get Carnell Tate. 13 and 61 in exchange for the 6th overall pick. As many mocks as I've run, and I probably ran 100 today alone just to test this theory, he won't get past the Browns at 6. I just can't really see it happening unless they go Francis Maui-Noah, and in which case I don't really see him getting past like 8 with the New Orleans Saints. He won't make it to you at 13 is the point. So if you want him, you've got to move up, and the price tag is pretty steep. But you could go get him. This would be, as we've talked about, an enormous addition to this offense. It would change the game for this Rams team in a lot of ways. You would be bringing in an unbelievable weapon to pair with 2 already awesome weapons in Puka and Devontae. And I think there's an added trait with Carnell Tate that makes him maybe even more valuable, or to be honest with you, just straight up even more valuable than the guys we've talked about like Makai Lemon, Jordan Tyson, KC Concepcion. And we'll get into that in a minute. But if you're not familiar, he is Dane Brugler's #1 ranked receiver. Unbelievable size, great hands with this dude. He's great after the catch. I love everything about his tape, and we'll talk about him more in just one second. But first, I got to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Prize Picks. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. Prize Picks is the place to be if you love daily fantasy sports, guys, or you just want to make watching sports even more exciting than it already is. Player picks are on fire right now with playoff basketball getting going and the baseball season rolling as well. There's no better place to cash in on all that action than Prize Picks. You just have to pick 2 to 6 players and select more or less on stat projections, including points, rebounds, assists, 3-pointers, and several others across all sports. If you're more of a baseball guy, you could choose stats such as hits, home runs, and strikeouts. And you guys can always use Prize Picks' brand new social features to follow other players on the app, just like me or producer Mike. We're both on there. I'm at Jackson_Durham. If you guys want to check me out in the lineups that I've been getting after, like this one that I've got for the playoff basketball action this weekend. We've got the more on Alperen Sengun's double-doubles, the more on the points and assists for Amen Thompson, and the more on 3-pointers made from LeBron James. So you guys could tail me on this lineup, you could fade me on this lineup, whatever you do, just do it at Prize Picks. And when you download the Prize Picks app today, use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with Prize Picks. The clickable link to download the app is in the comments and the description. As always, thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show. Let's get back into discussing Carnell Tate, though, because again, guys, you're getting the best receiver in this class at a pretty steep price. Like we talked about, it's not cheap to go up and draft Carnell Tate, but he is worth the price tag in a lot of ways, in my opinion. If you think that Carnell Tate can be the heir to Davante Adams, that he can succeed Davante Adams in his role as the opposite to Puka Nacua, that's the word I'm looking for. And the role that Davante filled for you in the red zone, especially as the go up and get it guy, not just for a couple of seasons, but for a long time, for a career, not alongside, obviously you have him for this year alongside Matthew Stafford, but this would give you Puka and Carnell Tate for hopefully the next 10 years as a 1-2 for a brand new quarterback. We've talked about this idea a lot of needing to set the table, not just for Stafford in a Super Bowl run in 2026. Of course, we know the offense is going to be fantastic this upcoming season, but you've got to set the table for the future as well. I think you've got to consider the fact that Davante Adams and Matthew Stafford, the odds of them both retiring together after 2026, especially if we get the job done and win a Super Bowl, is greater than 75%, in my opinion. It is a 3/4 chance that you're not going to have either of those guys next season. You've got to think about how can we recruit our next QB or set up a drafted quarterback for success if that's the path that Les Snead and Sean McVay ultimately choose to go down. And this would be an excellent way to do it, but it does come with downside, and that is, hey, you're picking one time in the first 90 selections of this draft if you make this move. Moving off of 13 and 61, you already only had one pick in the top 50 after the Trent McDuffie trade, with the second round pick being deep in the second round. Now you only have one in the top 50 at 6 and one in the top 90. That's a long time to wait at the end of the day. It doesn't give you a lot of opportunity to add new talent in the draft. We'll try to address that a little bit with a second trade that we'll make later in today's show. So we'll get there in a minute. But first, let's see what we can do at 93. So we had a couple options on the board. Sam Heck, the interior offensive lineman out of Kansas State, was of interest. Brian Parker, also of interest. Guys that we could add as depth pieces to that line or potentially heirs apparent to Steve Avila's role, or I would like this a lot less, but the Rams have to make a decision between Kevin Dotson and Steve Avila. I don't think you can keep both those guys for the long term. Daylen Everette was another interesting option, the corner out of Georgia. We could look to continue adding depth behind the options we've already added, or a potential heir to Matthew Stafford in Garrett Nussmeier. I settled for option number 3, Daylen Everette. I think he would be an excellent addition to this Rams secondary. We've talked about him a little bit before, but I think what you got to know about him is he is a perfect fit for the new vision that Jimmy Lake has for this secondary, for Jimmy Lake's style of defense. He is long, he is strong, and he is physical in man coverage. He'll need to learn to continue developing his zone skill set. I think that's the biggest area of growth for him. He's not going to be a day one starter for you at the end of the day. I think he can play a rotational role, but you don't need a day one starter. You need depth for this room at the end of the day. Kobe Durant is gone. Roger McCreary is gone. Emmanuel Forbes may be gone after this season. He's likely to play a smaller role this year. You need a guy like Daylen Everette that you can grow with alongside this room. Someone for Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson to take under their wings. We've heard a lot about Trent McDuffie's ability to develop younger guys from his time in Kansas City and the praise that he received from their young corner room. Let's give him somebody to work with in Daylen Everette, as well as Jimmy Lake, somebody to work with, someone who I think is a great match for the scheme and for the ideas that Jimmy Lake, is going to want to implement. Because again, you watch this guy's tape at Georgia, I think he was one of the most underrated defensive backs in the SEC last season, and I think he shows up consistently in the biggest moments. 11 pass breakups and 1 pick last year, but he got his pick in a huge game for them. And then you go back to 2024, 2 picks in the SEC championship game against Texas. An enormous performance in one of the biggest games of Georgia's entire season and of his entire career at Georgia. I like guys who show up when it matters most. Daylen Everette absolutely has that on his resume. But let's make another trade here. Like I talked about, I want to move back up into this draft. We have no picks in the 4th round, and Les Snead has outright told us, I don't value the picks on day 3 of this year's draft, at least late on day 3. So let's move up to the earliest round of day 3, giving up day 3 picks, 1/6 and 2/7 to go up to the 134th pick in the 4th round. Why would the Raiders make this trade? Producer Mike actually asked me that before we got into this one, saying, hey, I don't know if this one's super realistic. And maybe it's not. But at the end of the day, I think the Raiders could use the ability to take some extra shots in this year's draft. If there's one roster that is completely unsettled, that is pretty far away from being a contender next season, it's Vegas. And giving them 3 extra picks on day 3 gives them 3 extra guys to work with, 3 more potential options, 3 more moldable balls of clay, and is moving down 70 spots to add 3 more players to your roster or 2 more players to your roster really the worst thing in the world for that team? I don't think so at the end of the day. But it allows us to get Drew Shelton if we were able to pull this trade off, an offensive tackle out of Penn State, who I think would be an excellent match for what the Rams want to do with their offensive lineman. He is a move blocker to its highest degree. His agility, got a basketball background, and it just absolutely shows up. Shuffling the feet. You see, like, I've watched a little bit of his, I've watched a lot of his football tape. I haven't watched any of his basketball tape, but what I want to know is, like, does that shuffling his feet translate from defense? Like, I feel like this guy would be an excellent defender on the basketball court because the way he gets to his landmarks as an offensive tackle, the quickness, the first step that he has is incredible. I can't imagine trying to drive into the paint, drive the lane for a layup on this dude. He's just not going to let it happen, especially because he's 6'5", 316 pounds. Great size for an offensive tackle as well. A little bit limited with his length, but I think he makes up for it with his agility. He almost reminds me of like a Rob Havenstein, who just wasn't like an unbelievable moldable project. Like, you didn't look at Rob Havenstein's build as like, oh, that's a project or a perfect offensive tackle. Drew Shelton's kind of the same way, but they both make up for it with great technique and one excellent quality, which is his agility and his burst on the first step. And again, we need depth for this offensive line. This tackle room is unsettled. Warren McClendon, I think, can be the right tackle that you need, can be your long-term option, but you got to commit to that if you really want it, and you need depth for this room. DJ Humphries still unsigned. David Questenberry got a new contract, but do you really trust him to start if injuries were to come up? I think Drew Shelton is an immediate upgrade for your depth at the tackle position and can fill in if an injury was to come up for A.J. Jackson or for, Warren McClendon. Gosh, my gosh. All right, totally blank there. Lastly, last pick that we had on day 3, Red Murdock in the 7th round. We picked him with the 252nd pick, the last pick that we retained in the 7th round. Obviously, we traded our other 3 picks in that range. And so Red Murdock, I think he comes in immediately for you as just solid depth for this linebacker room, likely going to play a role on special teams in Bubba Ventrone's new unit, and I think he can be a good fit for that coming out of Buffalo. He's probably familiar with our boy Sean Dolak as well, so it adds a little bit of familiarity to the room as well. Let's roll back through our draft. So the first thing we did was make a big move up. We traded the 13th and the 61st overall pick for the 6th overall selection from the Cleveland Browns, and of course we used that to go get Carnell Tate. Then we made another trade. We traded with the Raiders in the 4th round. We sent our 3 of our day 3 picks, the 6th and 2 7ths, in exchange for a 4th. Remember, we're out of the 4th round this year. And now this would be the total draft. I want you guys to give me a grade in the comment section. I want you to think about how you would feel if this was the Rams' actual draft, if this is how it went next Thursday. Remember, we're just 6 days away from draft day. Hit that sub button, by the way, because we are going to be covering every minute of the NFL draft, every single pick that the Rams make, every trade that the Rams make. We will be making a video, so make sure you are locked in for that. And make sure you give me a grade before you get out of here. Give me an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F in the comment section. As always, I'll be responding. And as always, thank you for spending your time with us today. We always appreciate that. And let's go Rams.